She danced all night with the heir, and in the morning his scent was still on the bed. Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Sofia Martinez adjusted her earpiece for the 5th time in 10 minutes, scanning the ballroom with the precision of someone whose career depended on this night going perfectly, because it absolutely did. The annual Riverfront Children's Hospital Charity Gala represented her biggest event yet at Premier Planning, and her boss had made it clear that impressing tonight's wealthy donors could elevate her from assistant event coordinator to full partner within the year. "Marcus, the ice sculpture is dripping onto table 7, she whispered urgently into her headset. "And please tell me the band knows they're supposed to switch to jazz standards when dinner is served in 20 minutes. Her assistant's voice crackled back. "On it! And yes, they know. Breathe, Sophia. The room looks incredible." She allowed herself a moment to take in her handiwork. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel had been transformed into an enchanted garden, with cascading white orchids and twinkling lights, creating the illusion of stars. 300 of Manhattan's elite mingled in designer formal wear, champagne flutes catching the light as servers weaved expertly through the crowd. At 28, Sophia had clawed her way up from community college and weekend waitressing shifts to become one of the most promising event planners in New York. The daughter of Dominican immigrants who had sacrificed everything for her education, she carried their expectations alongside her own ambitions. Failure wasn't an option, especially not tonight. Her phone vibrated with a text from her boss, Eleanor. Hayes Group asking about seating chart. CEO's son apparently arrived unexpectedly. Fix it. Sophia's stomach dropped. The Hayes Hotel Group was considering acquiring Premier Planning as their exclusive event coordinator, a deal that would secure the company's future and her position within it. Eleanor had been handling the negotiations personally, and Sophia had never met any of the Hayes executives. "Marcus," she hissed into her headset, "I need to find an extra seat at table 1, now." "That's the VIP table. We're at maximum capacity." "Then make room," she interrupted. "The Hayes heir just showed up unannounced." Sophia smoothed her midnight blue gown, a sample sale find she'd splurged on despite her budget, and headed toward the reception desk to grab the seating chart. As she rounded a column, she collided with something solid and warm. Strong hands steadied her shoulders as champagne sloshed over the rim of her glass. "I'm so sorry," a deep voice said. She looked up into the most piercing green eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with dark hair, and the kind of features that suggested both privilege and character. Strong jawline, straight nose, one eyebrow slightly higher than the other, in what appeared to be perpetual skepticism. "Entirely my fault," Sophia said, regaining her composure. "I wasn't looking where I was going." The stranger's hands lingered on her shoulders a beat too long before he released her. "Are you all right? I didn't ruin your dress, did I?" She glanced down and was relieved to see the champagne had missed her. "All clear, though I should probably slow down anyway." She raised her glass with a self-deprecating smile. "Working event." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Ah, so you're responsible for all of this?" He gestured to the transformed ballroom. "Guilty as charged. Sofia Martinez, Premier Planning." "Alex," he replied simply, without offering a last name. "It's beautiful work. The lighting alone must have taken days to conceptualize." Sophia tilted her head, surprised by his observation. Most guests only noticed the food or complained about the temperature. "You have an eye for detail, Alex." "Occupational hazard." His smile revealed a slight dimple in his left cheek. "I evaluate spaces for a living." Before she could inquire further, Marcus's voice came through her earpiece. "Seat found at table 1. Where are you?" "Duty calls," she said to Alex. "Enjoy the evening." "Wait." He touched her wrist lightly. "Save me a dance later." "When you're off duty." Something about his directness caught her off guard. She wasn't the type to dance with strangers at work events, but there was something disarmingly genuine in his expression. "I'm never fully off duty at these things," she said, "but find me during the band's second set. If the ice sculpture hasn't melted completely by then, I might be able to spare one dance." His smile widened. "I'll hold you to that, Sofia Martinez." She hurried away, already regretting the moment of unprofessionalism. Eleanor would have her head if she caught Sofia fraternizing with a guest. Still, she couldn't help glancing back once to find him watching her go, that hint of a smile still playing on his lips. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of minor crises and triumphs. The governor arrived late but in good spirits. The featured artist's speech moved 3 donors to immediately double their pledges. The head chef sent out a perfect dinner service, and Sofia managed to discreetly handle a seating dispute between 2 society matrons with decades-old grudges. She still hadn't spotted the elusive heir, and Eleanor seemed increasingly tense each time they crossed paths. "Have you seen him?" her boss demanded during a brief moment in the kitchen. "Who? The Hayes son?" "Alexander Hayes." Eleanor lowered her voice. 32, Harvard Business School, worked his way through every department of the company before his father named him COO last year. Word is he'll be taking over as CEO within months. He's exactly the kind of connection we need, Sofia. "I haven't seen anyone matching that description," Sofia said, mentally scanning the faces she'd met. "But table 1 is complete now." Eleanor shook her head. "He's not seated. Apparently he's walking the room, getting a feel for our operation. His father says he's the one who'll make the final call on the acquisition." A server appeared with a fresh tray of desserts, and Sofia directed him toward the main floor. As the kitchen doors swung closed behind him, the sound of the band filtered through. They had shifted to slower numbers, and she realized with a start that it was already past 10. The second set, when she had promised that dance. "I need to check on the dance floor," she told Eleanor, who was already distracted by an incoming call. The ballroom had transformed yet again as dinner concluded. Tables had been pushed back, creating a generous dance floor where several couples now swayed to a jazz standard. Sofia circled the perimeter, checking that the lighting transition had executed properly when she felt a tap on her shoulder. "I believe you promised me something," Alex said, appearing at her side. Up close, she noticed his tuxedo was impeccably tailored, probably bespoke. A subtle platinum watch peeked from beneath his cuff, understated but undoubtedly worth more than her monthly rent. "I made no promises," she corrected him. "I said might. Very different. Then might I have this dance?" He extended his hand, a challenge in his eyes. Sofia hesitated. The event was running smoothly. Eleanor was nowhere in sight, and something about this man made her curious in a way she hadn't felt in years. "One dance," she conceded, placing her hand in his. Alex led her onto the dance floor, just as the band transitioned to a slower version of "The Way You Look Tonight." His hand settled at the small of her back, warm and steady, as he guided her into a simple step. "So," she said, "you evaluate spaces? Architecture, real estate?" "Something like that," he replied vaguely. "But tonight, I'd rather talk about you. How does someone become the kind of person who can transform a sterile hotel ballroom into this?" For the next 5 minutes, Sofia found herself telling him about her journey, the community college design classes, the wedding planning assistant jobs, the night courses in business, while working days at a catering company. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that suggested he understood more about her industry than most. "Your parents must be proud," he said when she mentioned their sacrifices. Sofia felt a pang. "They wanted me to be a lawyer or doctor, something stable. Event planning seemed frivolous to them. We're still working through that." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Parents and their expectations. I know something about that." The music shifted, but neither of them moved to separate. Instead, he adjusted seamlessly to the new rhythm, and she followed his lead. "You're a good dancer," she observed. My mother insisted on lessons, said no son of hers would embarrass her at charity functions. Sophia laughed. Smart woman. She was. A shadow crossed his face. She passed away 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Sophia said, genuinely moved by the brief flash of vulnerability. He spun her gently, then drew her slightly closer when she returned. What about you? Where did you learn to dance? YouTube tutorials in my apartment, she admitted. I figured if I was going to plan events with dancing, I should at least know the basics. Alex laughed, a rich sound that seemed to vibrate through his chest. YouTube tutorials, of course. You're full of surprises, Sophia Martinez. Their eyes met, and for a moment the crowded ballroom seemed to fade around them. Then her earpiece crackled to life. Sophia, Eleanor's looking for you, Marcus's voice warned. Something about the Hayes group wanting to meet the team before they leave. She stepped back reluctantly. I have to go. Another dance? Alex asked, still holding her hand. I really can't, she said. There's a potential client I need to meet. It's important. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then thank you for this one. It was the highlight of my evening. Sophia felt a blush creeping up her neck. Mine too, she admitted before she could think better of it. She turned to go, then stopped. Will you be at the after-party? The team always goes to Bluebird Lounge after these events, around midnight. The question surprised even her. She never invited guests to staff gatherings. Alex seemed equally surprised, but pleased. I have a late meeting, but I might stop by. Save me another dance. Maybe, she said with a smile, then hurried away to find Eleanor. She located her boss near the coat check, speaking urgently with the hospital's chief of surgery. There you are, Eleanor said, waving Sophia over. We need to find Alexander Hayes before he leaves. His father says he was impressed with the event, but he wants to formally introduce us. They circled the thinning crowd for 20 minutes, but the elusive heir had apparently departed early. Eleanor sighed in disappointment. His father says he had another engagement. We'll have to reschedule. But the good news is, Hayes Sr. loved everything. He specifically mentioned the lighting and the flow of the room. Sophia felt a glow of pride, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the mysterious Alex and their dances, plural, despite her one dance promise. There had been something between them, a connection she rarely felt with the men she met in her hectic life. By midnight, the gala had concluded successfully. The final donation tally had exceeded their goal by 20%. Eleanor had loosened up enough to suggest they all deserved a celebratory drink at their usual spot. At Bluebird Lounge, Sophia found herself watching the door while her colleagues toasted their success. Marcus noticed her distraction. Waiting for someone? He teased. That guy you were dancing with? Sophia rolled her eyes. Just making sure Eleanor doesn't bring any last-minute guests. You know how she gets after a successful event. Suddenly, everyone's her new best friend. But as 1 o'clock approached with no sign of Alex, she accepted that he wasn't coming. It was just as well. Getting involved with a client's guest would be unprofessional, regardless of how good he looked in a tuxedo or how perfectly they'd moved together on the dance floor. She was gathering her coat to leave when her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Regret missing the after-party. Meeting ran late. Breakfast tomorrow? Alex, your dance partner, who convinced the coat check attendant to share your number. Hope that's not too forward. Sophia stared at the message, torn between professional caution and the undeniable pull she'd felt toward him. Against her better judgment, she typed back, very forward, but I'm free at 9, Rosie's Cafe on 23rd. His reply came instantly. I'll be there. Sweet dreams, Sophia. Did that? As she stepped into the cool night air and hailed a cab home, Sophia couldn't suppress a smile. Tomorrow was her rare day off, and somehow the prospect of spending part of it with a near stranger seemed like the perfect way to celebrate her professional triumph. What she couldn't possibly know was that her dance partner was currently sitting in the Hayes Group's downtown office, reviewing Premier Planning's acquisition portfolio, with her name highlighted in the personnel section as promising talent to retain post-merger. The same hands that had held her so carefully on the dance floor now held her professional fate, though neither of them yet realized the collision course their lives had just begun. Alexander Hayes stared at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment, sleep evading him despite the late hour. The city lights cast shifting patterns across the dark expanse above his bed, much like the thoughts swirling through his mind, predominantly occupied by a woman in a midnight blue dress who danced like she had studied the steps but added something uniquely her own to every movement. He hadn't planned on attending the gala at all. Hospital charity events were his father's domain, not his. But when Richard Hayes announced he was considering acquiring Premier Planning as part of their vertical integration strategy, Alex had decided a first-hand assessment was necessary. He'd intended to observe silently, evaluate the operation's efficiency, and leave with enough data to make an informed business decision. Instead, he'd left with the phone number of the company's rising star and a persistent smile he couldn't seem to shake. At 5:30, he gave up on sleep and headed for his home gym. By 7, he had showered, reviewed the quarterly projections for the Hayes Group's newest property in Miami, and changed his outfit 3 times, settling on dark jeans and a light blue button-down that his sister once said made him look like a human instead of a corporate robot. The corner office that had been his second home for the past 7 years wouldn't see him until afternoon. For the first time in recent memory, Alexander Hayes had a personal appointment that took precedence over work. "This is purely research," he told himself as his driver navigated toward Chelsea. "Getting to know key personnel before acquisition is just good business." Even he didn't believe the lie. Rosie's Cafe was exactly the kind of place Alex rarely frequented. A cozy neighborhood establishment with mismatched vintage furniture, local art on exposed brick walls, and no reservations policy. He arrived 20 minutes early to find a line already forming outside. Rather than pulling rank or offering cash for preferential treatment, as he might have done for a business meeting, he simply joined the queue, oddly enjoying this glimpse into normal New York life. At 8:55, he secured a small table by the window and ordered coffee for 2. At 9:10, he checked his phone, wondering if he'd been stood up, something that had literally never happened to him before. At 9:15, the bell above the door jingled, and Sophia Martinez rushed in, slightly breathless and impossibly more beautiful in daylight. She wore simple jeans, a soft cream sweater that slipped slightly off one shoulder, and minimal makeup that highlighted her natural features. Warm brown eyes, high cheekbones, and full lips now curved into an apologetic smile as she spotted him. "I'm so sorry," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "The F train decided to have an existential crisis this morning." Alex smiled, charmed by her description. "I considered sending a search party, but figured the MTA might have claimed another victim." "You take the subway?" she asked skeptically, eyeing his clearly expensive watch. "Not since business school," he admitted, "but I remember the trauma." A waitress appeared with a coffee pot, and Sophia gratefully accepted a cup. "I need this more than oxygen right now. Last night went later than expected." "Successful event?" Alex asked, already knowing the answer from his father's glowing review. "Beyond expectations. The hospital raised nearly 40% more than last year." Pride colored her voice. "My boss thinks it might lead to a major new client." Alex sipped his coffee to hide his reaction. "Congratulations. That's impressive." "Enough about work," Sophia said, studying the menu. "I spend 6 days a week thinking about other people's events. Today is my day off, and I want pancakes and conversation that doesn't involve seating charts." "Deal," Alex agreed, finding himself relieved at the chance to temporarily set aside his professional identity. No work talk. They ordered blueberry pancakes for her, eggs Benedict for him, and settled into conversation that flowed with surprising ease. He learned she had an older brother who coached high school basketball in Queens, a collection of vintage cameras she never had time to use, and a habit of watching old black-and-white movies when she couldn't sleep. "What about you?" she asked as their food arrived. Mystery man who evaluates spaces. What do you do when you're not crashing charity galas and charming event planners into breakfast dates? Alex paused, weighing his options. He could tell her the truth now, but something held him back. The rare pleasure of being seen as just a man, not a Hayes, not the heir to an empire that his grandfather had built from nothing. I play squash badly, he offered instead. I read historical biographies, and I have a weakness for sci-fi shows that my team would mock mercilessly if they knew. Your team? Sophia raised an eyebrow. Work colleagues, he said vaguely. What about you? What does Sophia Martinez do when she's not transforming hotel ballrooms into enchanted forests? She laughed, the sound light and genuine. Sleep mainly. This job doesn't leave much room for hobbies. But I'm trying to learn Portuguese. My mom's side of the family is from the Dominican Republic, but has Brazilian roots. And I volunteer at a community center teaching event planning basics to high school kids. That's admirable, Alex said sincerely. Sophia shrugged, cutting into her pancakes. It's selfish, really. I get to remind myself why I fell in love with this work in the first place. These kids get so excited about creating something special out of nothing. Before budgets and client demands and corporate politics enter the equation. There was something wistful in her tone that resonated with Alex. He remembered his own early days in the family business, before responsibility had gradually eclipsed passion. Do you ever think about doing something else? He asked. Starting your own company, maybe? Sophia looked up, surprise evident on her face. How did you know that? Just a guess. You seem like someone with vision. She twirled her fork thoughtfully. I have a business plan. I've had one for 3 years. Something smaller, more personal than Premier, focusing on community events, cultural celebrations, making beautiful experiences accessible to people who can't afford to spend $500,000 on a one-night event. What's stopping you? Reality, she said with a rueful smile. Capital, connections, the crushing student debt from my business degree, the fact that I'd be competing against established firms with decades of history. She took a sip of coffee. And honestly, I'm close to making partner at Premier. If that happens, it changes everything. My salary would triple, I'd have equity, access to their client base. Alex nodded, feeling a twist of discomfort. If the Hayes acquisition went through as planned, Premier's existing partnership track would likely be restructured. Senior staff would be retained. But the Hayes Group's corporate events division had its own hierarchy and protocols. Enough about my unrealized ambitions, Sophia said, clearly eager to change the subject. Tell me something no one knows about you. Alex, no last name. He considered the question, then offered a truth he rarely shared. I paint terrible, abstract things that my sister insists on hanging in her guest bathroom to torment visitors. Sophia's expression softened. I wouldn't have guessed that. Few people would. He hesitated. It was something my mother and I did together. After she got sick, he trailed off, surprised by his own openness. Sophia reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. That's lovely. That you continue something that connected you. The simple gesture, warm, unguarded, lacking any agenda, affected him more than he expected. In his world of strategic alliances and calculated relationships, genuine connection was rare. Their conversation meandered through childhood memories, travel disasters, and passionate debates about whether New York pizza was truly superior to Chicago deep dish. She insisted yes. He played devil's advocate despite secretly agreeing. 2 hours passed before either of them checked the time. I should get going, Sophia said reluctantly, glancing at her phone. I promised my neighbor I'd water her ridiculous collection of plants while she's visiting her sister. Plant sitting, serious responsibility, Alex said, signaling for the check. You have no idea. She has names for all of them and left a 3-page care guide. I'm pretty sure she has cameras monitoring my plant parenting skills. When the check arrived, Sophia reached for her wallet, but Alex shook his head. Please, my invitation. She looked ready to protest, then smiled. Next time is on me, then. The implication that there would be a next time hung between them, pleasant and full of possibility. Outside the cafe, they paused awkwardly. Alex was unaccustomed to the uncertainty of these moments. In business, next steps were always clearly defined. In his limited dating experience, most women had clear expectations of what involvement with a Hayes entailed. "Thank you for breakfast," Sophia said. "This was unexpectedly nice." "Unexpectedly?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "Your standards must be abysmal." She laughed. "I meant I don't usually have breakfast with men I meet at work events, or dance with them, for that matter. I'm honored to be the exception." He took a chance. "Would you like to have dinner sometime, when you're not saving the world one perfectly executed event at a time?" Sophia studied him for a moment. "I'd like that, but I should warn you, I have a marathon event week coming up. The soonest I could manage is next Sunday." "Sunday works," he said, unexpectedly pleased by the prospect of seeing her again, even if it meant waiting a week. They exchanged proper contact information this time, and Alex watched as she walked toward the subway entrance, turning once to wave with a smile that stirred something long dormant in his chest. His driver was waiting around the corner, and as Alex settled into the back seat, reality crashed back like a cold wave. His phone displayed 12 missed calls and 23 emails, most flagged urgent. The top notification was a calendar reminder for 11 o'clock. Final review of Premier Planning acquisition proposal with legal. Alex closed his eyes briefly. He had exactly 90 minutes to decide how to handle the increasingly complicated situation he'd created for himself. Meanwhile, Sophia's subway ride home was interrupted by a call from Eleanor. "Where have you been?" her boss demanded without preamble. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." "It's my day off," Sophia reminded her. "I was having breakfast with a friend." "Well, consider your day un-off. We have a meeting at Hayes headquarters tomorrow morning at 9, and I need you to prepare the full presentation package. Richard Hayes wants to see our complete portfolio." Sophia's stomach tightened. "I thought that meeting wasn't scheduled until next month." "It's been moved up. Apparently, Alexander Hayes is pushing to finalize several acquisitions before the end of the quarter," his assistant called this morning. "Did you actually speak with Alexander Hayes?" Sophia asked, a seed of curiosity sprouting. "No one speaks directly to Alexander Hayes unless he initiates it," Eleanor said with a hint of awe. "He's famously private, doesn't do interviews, avoids industry events, works exclusively through his executive team. Richard says his son is brilliant, but intensely focused on results, not relationships." Something about that description didn't align with the attentive man who had listened so carefully to her dreams over pancakes, but Sophia brushed the thought aside. "I'll come to the office now," she said. "Should we include the children's hospital event?" "Absolutely. It's our strongest recent work. And Sophia," Eleanor paused dramatically, "wear the charcoal suit tomorrow. We need to look like we belong in their world if this merger is going to happen." "Merger?" The word echoed uncomfortably. Sophia had been thinking of the Hayes Group as a new client, not a corporate overlord. "I thought they were just hiring us as their exclusive event coordinator." Eleanor laughed. "Oh, honey, the Hayes Group doesn't hire, they acquire. They've been vertically integrating every service their hotels use. If we're lucky, we'll be their next conquest." The call ended, leaving Sophia with a growing sense of unease. She'd spent years building her position at Premier, carefully navigating toward partnership. What would acquisition mean for that path? As the train rumbled beneath Manhattan, two separate worlds were colliding faster than either Sophia or Alexander could possibly anticipate. While she headed to the office to prepare for a meeting with an executive she'd never met, he sat in his corner office reviewing her professional history and accomplishments, her smiling employee photo paper-clipped to a folder marked Key Personnel Assessment. By evening, Sophia had prepared a meticulous presentation, highlighting Premier Planning's most impressive events. She'd worked through dinner, fueled by determination and vending machine snacks, when her phone lit up with a text. Still thinking about those pancakes, looking forward to Sunday. Alex? She smiled, despite her exhaustion. Something about him made the grueling day feel worthwhile. She texted back, currently buried in presentation prep, dreaming of pancakes and normal working hours. His response came quickly. Anything I can help with? Unless you can convince Alexander Hayes that Premier Planning is worth keeping intact during acquisition, probably not, she typed, then deleted it immediately. No sense burdening a new friend with work problems he couldn't possibly understand. Instead, she wrote, just the usual corporate dance, nothing a good night's sleep won't fix. Good night, Alex. Across town, Alexander Hayes stared at her message, guilt tightening his chest. The usual corporate dance she referenced so lightly was one where he was leading, controlling steps she couldn't yet see. Tomorrow morning, he would be sitting across a conference table from her, no longer just Alex, but Alexander Hayes, COO of the Hayes Group, evaluating the company she had helped build, and quite possibly dismantling her path to partnership in the process. He should tell her now, he knew, send a simple text explaining who he really was before she walked into that meeting unprepared. His finger hovered over the phone, but ultimately he set it aside. Tomorrow would arrive soon enough, bringing with it all the complications of their separate worlds colliding. For tonight, he was still just Alex, the man who had danced with her under twinkling lights and shared breakfast in a crowded cafe. Morning would reveal him as Alexander Hayes. And judging by the thorough background reports his team had compiled, Sophia Martinez was not someone who would take kindly to deception, no matter how unintentionally it had begun. Sophia woke before her alarm, anxiety propelling her into consciousness after a night of fitful sleep, filled with dreams of dancing in conference rooms and pancakes served on corporate letterhead. She'd laid out her charcoal suit the night before, the most expensive item in her wardrobe, purchased when Premier landed their first celebrity client. Standing before her bathroom mirror, she applied makeup with precision, aiming for what she privately called her corporate warrior look, confident but not intimidating, professional but not severe. Eleanor had once told her that women in business had to walk an impossible tightrope, too feminine and they weren't taken seriously, too assertive and they were labeled difficult. You're going to nail this, she told her reflection, though the twisting in her stomach suggested otherwise. Her phone chimed with a text from Eleanor. Car picking you up in 30 minutes. Bring extra copies of the Vanderbilt wedding and the tech conference proposals. Sophia glanced at her other notifications and saw a message from Alex sent late last night. Good luck with whatever's keeping you up. You'll be brilliant, I have no doubt. His unexpected encouragement brought a smile to her face. There was something refreshing about his confidence in her, despite knowing so little about her professional challenges. She typed a quick reply, thanks. Off to a big meeting that could change everything. Wish me luck. She hesitated before adding, looking forward to Sunday, then press send before she could overthink it. At 8:15, a sleek town car delivered Sophia and Eleanor to the Hayes Group headquarters in Midtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds. The lobby alone spoke of quiet wealth and power. Soaring ceilings, minimalist furnishings in muted tones, and an enormous sculpture of the Hayes logo carved from a single block of marble. Remember, Eleanor murmured as they were escorted to the executive floor by a politely efficient assistant. Let me do most of the talking. Richard Hayes is old-school business. He expects deference. If his son is there, which is unlikely, just follow my lead. He's supposedly brilliant but brutally direct. Sophia nodded, clutching her portfolio case like a shield. She'd spent half the night researching Alexander Hayes, but information was surprisingly scarce for someone so influential. The few available photos showed him at official functions, always in impeccable suits, his expression serious and unreadable. Articles described him as intensely private, ruthlessly efficient, and the architect of Hayes Group's aggressive expansion. And nothing in her research had prepared her to like the man, which was just as well. This meeting wasn't about personal feelings, it was about preserving Premier's identity and her future within it. The executive conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Manhattan. A long table of polished walnut dominated the space, surrounded by 12 high-backed leather chairs. Richard Hayes was already seated at the head of the table, reviewing documents through reading glasses perched low on his nose. In his 70s, he retained the commanding presence that had built his empire. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, bespoke suit immaculate, signet ring gleaming on his right hand. "Eleanor, my dear," he said, standing to greet them, "right on time. Excellence in all things, just as I would expect." "Richard," Eleanor replied warmly, accepting his European-style kiss on both cheeks. "May I present Sophia Martinez, our rising star and the creative genius behind the Children's Hospital Gala you attended." Richard turned his assessing gaze to Sophia, who extended her hand with what she hoped was confidence. "Mr. Hayes, it's an honor to meet you officially." "The pleasure is mine," he said, his handshake firm. "Your work was exceptional. The lighting alone was worth whatever Eleanor is paying you, which I suspect isn't nearly enough." Sophia smiled, genuinely pleased by his specific compliment. "Thank you, sir. Lighting can transform perception more economically than physical elements. We designed a system that created 3 distinct atmospheres throughout the evening without a single manual adjustment." Richard nodded approvingly. "Smart, efficient, the kind of thinking we value at Hayes." He gestured toward the chairs. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. My son should be joining us shortly." Eleanor shot Sophia a surprised glance. Alexander Hayes rarely attended preliminary meetings, preferring to review reports rather than presentations. His presence signaled either special interest or special concern. Neither scenario guaranteed a positive outcome for Premier. They had just begun distributing materials when the conference room door opened and Sophia's world tilted on its axis. "Sorry I'm late," said a familiar voice. The call with Tokyo ran long. Sophia looked up to find herself staring into the same green eyes that had held hers while dancing, the same face that had smiled across a cafe table over pancakes. But instead of jeans and a casual button-down, he wore a perfectly tailored grey suit that screamed power and privilege. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly when he saw her, surprise quickly masked by professional composure. "Alex?" The name escaped her lips before she could stop it, confusion evident in her tone. "Ms. Martinez," he replied formally, though something flickered in his eyes. "I believe we met briefly at the gala." Briefly. The word hung between them, a lie by significant omission. Briefly didn't encompass dances that lasted through multiple songs. Briefly didn't cover breakfast conversations that stretched for hours. Briefly certainly didn't include making dinner plans for the coming weekend. Richard looked between them with interest. "You've already met my son, Alexander?" Eleanor jumped in smoothly. "Sophia managed the Children's Hospital Gala where you were both in attendance." Sophia forced herself to nod, years of professional training enabling her to maintain a neutral expression despite the storm brewing inside. "Yes, it was a passing encounter." Alexander, not Alex, never again just Alex in her mind, took the seat opposite her, his posture perfect, his face now unreadable. "I was impressed with the event. Very cohesive vision, excellent execution." "Thank you," Sophia replied, proud that her voice remained steady, despite the hurricane of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Confusion, embarrassment, and beneath it all, a sense of betrayal that felt disproportionate to their brief acquaintance, yet undeniable in its intensity. For the next hour, she operated on autopilot, her professional training carrying her through a presentation she could have delivered in her sleep. She highlighted Premier's most successful events, detailed their growth projections, and emphasized their unique approach to client relationships, all while steadfastly avoiding direct eye contact with Alexander Hayes, who watched her with unsettling intensity. Richard asked insightful questions about scalability and regional expansion. Eleanor spoke confidently about Premier's readiness to grow under the right partnership. Sophia contributed data-driven assessments of market trends and creative solutions to hospitality challenges. Throughout it all, Alexander remained largely silent, making occasional notes and studying their materials with methodical care. When he finally spoke, his question was directed solely at Sophia. You mentioned community investment as one of Premier's core values. How exactly do you balance that commitment with the profit expectations of your high-end clientele? The question pierced straight to the heart of the conversation she'd shared with him at breakfast, her dream of making beautiful experiences accessible beyond the ultra-wealthy. Had that been calculated? An assessment of her business acumen disguised as personal interest? Sophia straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since the meeting began. We don't see it as a balance to be struck, Mr. Hayes, but as complementary efforts that strengthen each other. Our high-end clients increasingly demand authentic experiences and social responsibility. By developing community programs, like our event planning workshops for underserved high school students, we cultivate diverse talent, innovative perspectives, and goodwill that directly enhances our premium offerings, while generating positive PR at minimal cost, he added, his tone impossible to read. The PR is a side benefit, not the motivation, Sophia replied evenly. Premier was founded on the belief that everyone deserves beauty and celebration in their lives, regardless of budget. Our community initiatives aren't charity, they're an expression of our fundamental values. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Admirably principled, Richard clapped his hands together once, breaking the tension. This is precisely why Premier has caught our attention. You understand that exceptional experiences aren't just for the wealthy, they're for everyone who stays at a Hayes property, whether they're paying $200 or $2,000 per night. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up conversations. Richard asked Eleanor to stay behind to discuss a few contractual matters, leaving Sophia to gather her materials while Alexander stood by the door, his presence an unavoidable obstacle to her escape. Ms. Martinez, he said quietly as she approached. A word in my office if you have a moment. It wasn't really a request. Sophia nodded stiffly, following him down a corridor lined with photographs of Hayes' properties around the world. His corner office was exactly what she would have expected, spacious but not ostentatious, meticulously organized, with a wall of windows overlooking the city he was systematically acquiring, one building at a time. He closed the door behind them and loosened his tie slightly, a small gesture that reminded her painfully of the less formal man she'd had breakfast with just yesterday. Sophia, he began. I prefer Ms. Martinez in professional settings, Mr. Hayes, she interrupted, surprised by the ice in her own voice. He inclined his head slightly. Of course, Ms. Martinez, I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything, she said, maintaining a tight grip on her composure. We had a chance encounter at an event, followed by breakfast. There was no obligation to disclose your full resume. That's technically accurate, but we both know it's not the whole truth. He moved toward his desk but didn't sit, instead leaning against it in a pose that was too casual for her current state of mind. I should have told you who I was, once I realized you worked for Premier. When exactly was that? Sophia asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. When we were dancing? When you got my number from the coat check? Or perhaps over blueberry pancakes while I shared my career aspirations with the man who's apparently deciding whether they have any chance of coming true? A muscle tightened in his jaw. I recognized your name when you introduced yourself at the gala. Premier was already on our acquisition shortlist. But I didn't attend that event with any intention of He stopped, seeming to choose his next words carefully. What happened between us wasn't business strategy. What exactly did happen between us, Mr. Hayes? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you gathered valuable intelligence from someone who had no idea they were being assessed. That's not... He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it in a way that made him look more like the Alex she'd danced with. You're right to be angry. I'm not angry, Sophia lied. I'm professional. There's a difference. Alexander, because she refused to think of him as Alex anymore, studied her face. For what it's worth, nothing you shared with me will negatively impact Premier or your position within it. How generous, she said, the words sharper than intended. Is that supposed to make me feel better about having breakfast with someone who wasn't who he claimed to be? Duh, I never claimed to be anyone other than myself, he countered, a hint of frustration breaking through his corporate veneer. Just because I didn't lead with my last name doesn't mean I was being deliberately deceptive. Sophia nearly laughed. You evaluate spaces for a living. That was the line you went with. Not I'm the COO of the Hayes Group, currently considering acquiring the company you've dedicated years of your life to building. Slight difference, wouldn't you say? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. When we met, I wanted a night off from being Alexander Hayes, just once, to have a conversation that wasn't colored by what my name means in this city. Then at breakfast, he hesitated. I enjoyed talking with you. It felt real in a way few things in my life do. The honesty in his voice nearly cracked her resolve, but Sophia had spent too many years in business to be swayed by what might be another carefully calculated approach. Well, congratulations on your authentic experience, Mr. Hayes. I hope it provided valuable insights for your acquisition strategy. She moved toward the door. If you'll excuse me, I need to find my boss. Sophia, Ms. Martinez, he corrected himself. Sunday's dinner. I'd still like to... I don't think that would be appropriate, she cut him off, hand on the doorknob. As you're undoubtedly aware, Hayes Group policy prohibits fraternization between executives and employees of companies under acquisition review. The flash of surprise on his face confirmed she'd done her research thoroughly. That policy is rarely enforced in preliminary stages, he said. Nevertheless, I prefer to maintain clear professional boundaries. Sophia straightened her shoulders. If there's nothing else pertaining to Premier's presentation, Mr. Hayes. Something hardened in his expression, the transformation from Alex to Alexander Hayes completing before her eyes. Just one thing. The community initiatives you mentioned. I'd like a detailed proposal on my desk by Friday, particularly the high school program. The board is interested in potential expansion as part of our corporate responsibility platform. It was a professional request, entirely reasonable, yet it felt like a deliberate reminder of the power dynamic between them. Sophia nodded curtly. Of course. Will that be all? For now. He moved behind his desk, the physical barrier emphasizing the distance between them. My assistant will follow up with specific requirements. Thank you for your time, Ms. Martinez. Sophia left his office with her head high, maintaining perfect composure until she reached the relative privacy of the elevator. Only then did she allow herself to exhale shakily, pressing her hands against the cool metal wall as the car descended 60 floors to the lobby. By the time Eleanor found her, Sophia had rebuilt her professional facade. There you are, her boss said, practically vibrating with excitement. Richard wants to fast-track the acquisition. He's talking about completing due diligence within 30 days. That's quick, Sophia managed, her mind still reeling from the morning's revelations. It's unprecedented, Eleanor corrected, ushering her toward the waiting car. Alexander Hayes apparently made a compelling case for immediate integration. Richard said his son rarely advocates this strongly for an acquisition target. Sophia bit her tongue to keep from asking what else Alexander had said about Premier or about her. Did they discuss the partnership track? My position post-acquisition? Eleanor's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Not specifically, but Richard assured me that key talent retention is a priority. They're not looking to dismantle Premier. They want our creative approach and client relationships intact. The promise sounded hollow to Sophia, who had researched enough Hayes acquisitions to know their pattern. Keep the brand name, maintain client relationships, but gradually absorb the operation into the Hayes corporate structure, with all the standardization that entailed. "What did Alexander want to discuss with you?" Eleanor asked as they settled into the back seat. "The community programs," Sophia replied, opting for partial truth. "He wants a detailed proposal by Friday." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Good sign. Focus on metrics and scalability in your write-up. Alexander is known for his data-driven approach. If you can demonstrate ROI on community investment, you'll get his attention." "I already have his attention," Sophia thought but didn't say. The question was what kind of attention and to what end. Back at the Premier offices, Sophia threw herself into work, taking refuge in the familiar challenges of event logistics and design concepts. By evening, she had drafted an outline for the community program proposal and handled 3 client emergencies without once allowing herself to think about green eyes or pancakes or the way her name had sounded in his voice. At 8:30, after most of the staff had departed, her phone chimed with a text notification. She knew without looking who it would be from, just as she knew she should ignore it. Instead, she found herself reaching for the phone, a moth drawn inexorably to flame. "I handled that badly this morning. You deserved better. I'm still the same person you had breakfast with, even if my last name complicates things." Sophia stared at the message, torn between the professional wisdom of not responding and the pull of unfinished conversation. After 5 minutes of internal debate, she typed, "With respect, Mr. Hayes, I don't think I know who you are at all. And given our professional relationship, it's probably best to keep it that way." His response came quickly. "The Hayes Group hasn't acquired Premier yet. There is no professional relationship, only a potential one. And I'd like the chance to explain myself properly, outside the constraints of a corporate conference room." Sophia laughed humorlessly. What constraints could possibly exist for a man in his position? Then another message appeared. "I've never lied to you, Sophia. Not about anything that matters." She set the phone down without responding, gathering her things to head home. On the subway ride to her apartment in Queens, she found herself revisiting their conversations, searching for clues she might have missed, for signs that his interest had been merely strategic. What troubled her most wasn't the omission of his last name or position. It was the realization that she'd genuinely connected with him, had felt something promising and rare, only to discover it might have been constructed on false pretenses. By the time she reached her apartment door, exhaustion had eclipsed anger. She kicked off her heels and headed straight for the shower, hoping hot water might wash away the lingering confusion of the day. 20 minutes later, wrapped in her oldest, most comfortable bathrobe, she collapsed onto her couch with a glass of wine and finally allowed herself to check the 3 additional messages that had arrived during her commute. "I understand your reluctance to engage further. For what it's worth, breakfast was the most honest conversation I've had in years." The proposal deadline was a professional request, not personal leverage. "If it helps, direct it to my assistant instead. Whether or not you believe me, I respect you, Sophia, both professionally and personally. I'll respect your boundaries as well." The messages were perfectly calibrated, respectful without pressuring, leaving the door open without pushing her through it. Sophia wondered if this was the same approach he used in business negotiations, a skill developed over years of corporate acquisitions. She set her phone aside without responding, determined to maintain professional distance until the acquisition process concluded. Her career, her future at Premier, and her hard-won reputation were too important to risk over a man she barely knew, regardless of how he made her feel when they danced, or how carefully he'd listened to her dreams over breakfast. Alexander Hayes might be accustomed to acquiring whatever caught his interest, but Sophia Martinez was not a company to be added to his portfolio. And until she knew whether her professional future hung in the balance of his corporate decisions, she would keep her personal feelings locked safely away. What she didn't realize, as she finally drifted into exhausted sleep, was that across town, Alexander Hayes sat in his penthouse office, staring at her unresponded messages while reviewing Premier's financial projections for the 5th time that day. Beside the corporate documents lay the community initiative outline she'd sent to his assistant, submitted not on Friday's deadline, but the same evening he'd requested it. The proposal was exceptional, comprehensive, innovative, and precisely aligned with the Hayes Group's stated values of accessible luxury. It was the work of a consummate professional who refused to let personal complications interfere with excellence, and it reminded him, with uncomfortable clarity, of exactly why he'd been drawn to her in the first place. Long before he knew her role at Premier or how their professional worlds might intersect. Alexander Hayes was accustomed to getting what he wanted, both professionally and personally. But for perhaps the first time in his adult life, he found himself caught between competing desires: the corporate acquisition that made perfect business sense, and the woman who had somehow slipped past his carefully constructed defenses during one dance and a breakfast that never should have happened. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of acquisition meetings and impossible deadlines. Sophia threw herself into work with singular focus, maintaining scrupulously professional interactions on the rare occasions Alexander Hayes appeared at Premier's offices. If anyone noticed the careful distance between them, they attributed it to the natural tension between acquirer and acquired. Eleanor had been ecstatic when Richard Hayes personally requested Sophia to coordinate an upcoming charity gala, the official launch of the Hayes Foundation's new educational initiative. "This proves they see your value," she'd insisted. "It's your chance to cement your position post-acquisition." But what Eleanor didn't know was that Alexander had recused himself from all decisions regarding Sophia's role, citing professional best practices. A fact Sophia discovered only when his assistant Caroline mentioned it during a planning call. "He never does that," Caroline had said, clearly puzzled. "Alexander usually insists on overseeing every aspect of integration. You must have made quite an impression." "More than you know," Sophia had thought but didn't say. Now, standing in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Temple of Dender, Sophia directed the setup for tomorrow's gala with meticulous attention. The space was transforming into a modern interpretation of ancient Egypt, elegant lighting casting hieroglyphic shadows across sandstone walls, custom installations celebrating education across millennia. "The east wall projection is still too blue," she called to the lighting technician. "We need warm amber to complement the sandstone." As the color temperature shifted, Sophia made notes on her tablet, checking items off her extensive preparation list. The Hayes Foundation Gala would be her most visible project yet, covered by major media outlets, attended by celebrities and power brokers, potentially the launching point for her post-acquisition career. If only she could stop thinking about the man whose name was emblazoned on every event document. The final design exceeds expectations. Alexander's voice behind her sent a jolt through Sophia's carefully maintained composure. She turned to find him studying the space with genuine appreciation, dressed in a casual button-down and slacks rather than his usual suit, still impeccable but less formal than their recent encounters. "Mr. Hayes," she acknowledged with professional courtesy. "I wasn't aware you were scheduled for a walkthrough today." "I wasn't," he admitted, "but tomorrow's my father's night. I wanted to see the space without the crowds." Sophia nodded, maintaining a careful distance. "The foundation team approved all elements. If you have concerns—" "I don't," he interrupted gently. "It's exceptional work, Sophia." The use of her first name hung between them, a small breach in the formal wall they'd constructed. "Thank you," she said simply, then gestured toward the central display. "We've incorporated elements from each educational initiative being launched tomorrow. The interactive stations allow guests to experience the Foundation's work firsthand. Alexander moved through the space, examining details with thoughtful attention. You've connected ancient knowledge transmission to modern educational approaches. It's inspired. His genuine admiration made maintaining professional detachment harder than Sophia anticipated. For several minutes, they walked the exhibition together, discussing design choices and thematic elements with a synchronicity that reminded her painfully of their earlier conversations. Your proposal for expanding Premier's community programs was approved yesterday, he said as they completed the circuit. Full funding integrated into the Hayes Foundation's educational platform. Surprise momentarily displaced Sophia's careful neutrality. That's wonderful news. The high school workshops have always operated on minimal resources. Not anymore. Something like pride colored his voice. The board was particularly impressed with your metrics on long-term community impact. It's rare to see quantifiable data on social initiatives. Numbers speak louder than noble intentions, Sophia said, unconsciously echoing a phrase he'd used during their breakfast conversation. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I believe I've said something similar. The moment stretched between them, teetering dangerously close to personal territory. Sophia retreated to safer ground. Will you be attending tomorrow evening, Mr. Hayes? Alexander, he corrected quietly. And yes, though I'll be maintaining a low profile. As I said, it's my father's night. Alexander, she conceded, the name feeling intimate despite her professional tone. The Foundation team requested visual documentation of board members with major donors. You should expect photographer coordination around 9:30. He nodded, studying her with an intensity that made maintaining eye contact difficult. Sophia, it's been 2 weeks. At some point we should discuss the acquisition timeline, she interrupted smoothly. I understand the due diligence phase concludes next week. Frustration flickered across his face. That's not what I meant. It's what's relevant in our current context, Sophia replied, grip tightening on her tablet. If you'll excuse me, I need to check the catering setup. As she moved to step past him, but Alexander gently caught her elbow. One question, then I'll respect your professional boundaries. Sunday dinner. Would you have come if you'd known who I was from the beginning? The unexpected question caught Sophia off guard. She should walk away, maintain the careful distance that protected her career and her heart. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. No, she admitted. I would have seen too many complications. And now those complications are reality, not theoretical. Sophia met his gaze directly. My career, my future at Premier, they're being decided in boardrooms I'm not invited into, by people including you. I've recused myself from all decisions regarding your position, he said. So I've heard. But you're still Alexander Hayes. Your name is still on the acquisition paperwork changing the company I've helped build. He released her arm slowly. What if the acquisition were already completed? What if your professional future were secure, position established, all uncertainties resolved? That's not our current reality, Sophia said, though the question stirred something she'd been trying desperately to suppress. Humor me, he pressed. If professional complications were removed from the equation, would you have dinner with me, Sophia? Not as Alexander Hayes of Hayes Group, not as Sophia Martinez of Premier Planning. Just as the two people who danced together and talked about dreams over pancakes. The naked vulnerability in his question stripped away her carefully constructed defenses. For a moment, Sophia allowed herself to imagine that simpler reality, one where their connection wasn't tangled in corporate politics and power dynamics. I don't know, she answered truthfully. The problem is, I can't separate who you are from what's happening to my company. Not yet. Alexander nodded, accepting her answer with surprising grace. Fair enough. Thank you for your honesty. He stepped back, professional demeanor sliding back into place. The space truly is remarkable, Ms. Martinez. Premier is fortunate to have your vision. The formal address stung more than it should have. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I'll ensure your assistant receives the final itinerary for tomorrow evening. He inclined his head slightly, then turned to leave. At the archway, he paused without looking back. For whatever it's worth, I've never regretted a dance more, or enjoyed one as much. Before Sophia could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone amid the ancient stones and modern lighting, wondering how a relationship that had barely begun could feel so complicated in its unraveling. The Hayes Foundation Gala exceeded all expectations. Celebrities posed beside educational exhibits, billionaires wrote substantial checks, and media outlets gushed over the innovative use of the historic space. Premier's stock rose metaphorically. Hayes groups rose literally following the announcement of their expanded educational initiatives. Sophia orchestrated it all from behind the scenes, appearing briefly only when necessary for logistical decisions. She spotted Alexander several times throughout the evening, charming donors, conferring with foundation executives, standing stoically beside his father during the formal remarks. He wore his public persona as comfortably as his perfectly tailored tuxedo, yet she caught moments when his mask slipped, a hint of genuine passion when discussing educational access, a flash of wry humor during pompous speeches, a moment of weariness when he thought no one was watching. They managed to avoid direct interaction until the event's conclusion, when they found themselves momentarily alone in the control room as staff began the complex breakdown process. "Congratulations," Alexander said simply. "My father is beyond pleased." The foundation director called it transformative. "Thank you," Sophia replied, surprised by the genuine pride his approval elicited despite her determination to remain emotionally detached. "Your father's vision for educational accessibility is inspiring." "It was my mother's vision, originally," he said quietly. "Education changed her life, took her from a small coal mining town to Columbia University. The foundation was her legacy project." The personal disclosure caught Sophia off guard. "I didn't know that." "Few people do." Alexander's expression softened momentarily. "She would have appreciated what you created here tonight, honoring ancient traditions while embracing innovation, finding beauty in knowledge." Something shifted between them in that moment, a glimpse beyond corporate titles to the people beneath. Before Sophia could respond, Eleanor burst into the room, flushed with excitement. "There you are!" her boss exclaimed. "Richard Hayes is asking for you, Sophia, and he's with the governor." The moment shattered. Alexander stepped back, professional mask firmly in place. "Don't keep them waiting, Ms. Martinez. My father detests tardiness." Sophia nodded, gathering her composure. "Of course. If you'll excuse me, Mr. Hayes." As she followed Eleanor out, Sophia glanced back once to find Alexander watching her go, an unreadable expression on his face. For a fleeting second, she glimpsed the man behind the corporate heir, the one who painted terrible abstract art and secretly enjoyed sci-fi shows. Then the door closed between them, and she returned to the glittering gala, where everyone knew exactly who Alexander Hayes was, and precisely what his attention might be worth. What no one knew, not Eleanor, not Richard Hayes, not the socialites and executives filling the ancient temple with modern ambition, was how that attention had felt when it was focused solely on her, unrelated to business strategy or corporate acquisition. How his eyes had crinkled at the corners when she made him laugh over pancakes, how carefully he'd listened to her dreams. By the time Sophia hailed a cab home at 2 a.m, the acquisition paperwork had been formally filed, setting in motion the final phase of Premier Planning's corporate fate. In less than a week, she would know whether her career path would remain intact or crumble beneath the Hayes corporate restructuring. What remained uncertain was whether her carefully guarded heart had already been acquired, without any paperwork, due diligence, or corporate approval necessary. 5 days after the gala, Sophia sat stunned in Premier's conference room as Eleanor announced the final acquisition terms. Not only would Premier retain its creative autonomy, but Sophia herself had been named Creative Director of Special Initiatives, a new position that would oversee community programs across all Hayes properties while maintaining her event design role. "It's unprecedented," Eleanor gushed. "Richard specifically requested these terms. Your work on the Foundation Gala apparently sealed the deal." Sophia accepted congratulations from colleagues while trying to process what this meant. The position was more than she'd hoped for. Greater influence, expanded resources, and a clear path to eventual executive leadership. Yet she couldn't help wondering about Alexander's involvement in these decisions, despite his official recusal. That question was answered later that afternoon, when Caroline, Alexander's assistant, appeared at her desk with a sealed envelope. "He asked me to deliver this personally," Caroline said, her expression curious but professional. Inside was a single sheet of Hayes Group letterhead containing just a few handwritten lines. "Your new position was my father's decision entirely. He was genuinely impressed by your vision and execution. I kept my promise to remain uninvolved in your professional future. Now that those complications have been resolved, the question remains. Sunday dinner, no titles, no corporate politics, just two people who once danced under twinkling lights. Alex, not Alexander Hayes, COO, just Alex." Below his signature was a phone number, not his business line, she realized, but a personal one. Sophia stared at the note, conflicting emotions warring within her. The professional boundaries she'd hidden behind no longer applied. The power imbalance had shifted. She now held a director-level position with substantial autonomy. The acquisition was complete, her future secure. All that remained was the question she'd been avoiding. Without those complications, who were they to each other? 3 days later, Sophia found herself at a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's corporate towers and society events. The rustic space with its checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles couldn't have been further from the luxury venues she typically frequented professionally. Alexander, Alex, as she'd tentatively begun thinking of him again, sat across from her in jeans and a casual sweater, looking more like the man from their breakfast than the corporate heir she'd come to know. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Sophia admitted. "It's been complicated." Understatement of the year. His smile held a hint of the warmth she remembered from their first meetings. "I've rehearsed this conversation approximately 47 times, but now I'm not sure where to begin." "How about the truth?" she suggested. "All of it this time." Alex nodded, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I never intended to meet you that night. I'd planned to observe the event anonymously, evaluate Premier's operations, and leave. Then I literally ran into you, and something shifted. You weren't impressed by me. You didn't even know who I was, and that was refreshingly rare in my world. So you deliberately withheld your identity." "At first, yes," he acknowledged, "but by breakfast it wasn't strategic anymore. I just wanted to be seen as myself, not my family name or corporate position. The longer I waited to tell you, the more impossible it seemed." Sophia studied him across the candlelight. "And the acquisition, was Premier always the target?" Premier was on our acquisition list months before we met," Alex confirmed. "But I'll admit, after meeting you, I advocated for accelerating the timeline. Not because of us, whatever this is, but because your vision for accessible excellence aligned perfectly with where I've been trying to take the company." "Your mother's influence," Sophia observed quietly. Something softened in his expression. "Yes. She believed luxury wasn't about exclusivity, but about making people feel valued, regardless of their circumstances. You understand that instinctively. It's why your community programs resonated so strongly with my father." For the first time since discovering his identity, Sophia felt the tension between them beginning to ease. They ordered wine, then pasta, conversation gradually shifting from careful explanations to more natural exchange. By dessert, they had cautiously circled back to the easy rapport of their breakfast weeks earlier. "I have a confession," Sophia said as they shared tiramisu. "I researched you extensively after our meeting in the Hayes boardroom. There's surprisingly little personal information available for someone in your position." Alex smiled ruefully. "Deliberately so. The Hayes name attracts enough attention without adding personal details to the mix. After what happened with my mother's illness becoming tabloid fodder." He paused, the old pain evident. Privacy became a priority. "Yet here you are, having dinner in public with a woman who isn't a society heiress or corporate connection." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Won't that damage your carefully cultivated mystique?" "Probably," he admitted. "But I'm finding I care less about that than I expected." His expression grew serious. "Ooh, Sophia, I know this started under complicated circumstances, but I'd like to see where it might go, without professional conflicts or hidden identities between us." The honesty in his voice resonated with something Sophia had been trying to ignore since their first dance. Despite everything, the connection between them remained, perhaps even strengthened by the challenges they'd navigated. "I'm still getting used to the idea that my new boss is the same man who asked me about my favorite movies over pancakes," she said with a small smile. "Technically, your new boss is my father," Alex pointed out. "My division oversees hotel operations, not special initiatives. We'd have minimal professional overlap." "You've thought about this?" Sophia observed. "Extensively," he confirmed. "Corporate structure, reporting relationships, conflict of interest policies, I've analyzed it from every angle. But ultimately, it's not about organizational charts. It's about whether you feel what I do, that there's something here worth exploring, complicated history and all." Sophia considered his words carefully. The rational, career-focused part of her recognized the potential complications. Yet something else, something that had been awakened during that first dance, urged her to take the risk. "One step at a time," she finally said. "No promises, no expectations, just seeing where this goes." Alex's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in the way she'd found so charming at breakfast. "I can work with that." As they left the restaurant, walking together through Brooklyn's quiet streets, their hands brushed once, twice, before Alex gently captured hers in his. The simple contact felt more significant than their dance had been, a conscious choice rather than a momentary escape. "I should warn you," Sophia said as they reached her subway station. "I don't typically date corporate heirs who acquire my company. Fortunately, I don't typically acquire companies to date their creative directors," Alex replied with a smile. "So we're both in uncharted territory." When he leaned down to kiss her goodnight, a brief, gentle contact that held the promise of more, Sophia felt the last of her reservations beginning to dissolve. This wasn't the Alex from the gala night, or the Alexander Hayes from the boardroom. This was someone more complex and more real than either version, someone worth getting to know, corporate complications and all. "Sunday dinners might become a habit," she murmured against his lips. "I certainly hope so," he replied, his eyes reflecting the same cautious optimism she felt blooming within her own heart. As Sophia descended into the subway, she couldn't help smiling at the unexpected turn her life had taken. From a chance collision at a charity gala, to a corporate acquisition, to this tentative new beginning, none of it had been planned, none of it followed her carefully structured career path. Yet somehow, it felt right in a way few things in her meticulously organized life ever had. The heir to an empire, and the girl who once practiced dancing with YouTube tutorials, an unlikely pairing by any measure. But as the train carried her home, Sophia found herself looking forward to discovering what might happen when professional boundaries no longer stood between them, and the only titles that mattered were simply Alex and Sophia. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, surveying another transformation under her direction. Tonight marked the first anniversary of the Hayes Foundation's educational initiative. and exactly 1 year since she'd collided with Alexander Hayes beside a melting ice sculpture, unknowingly changing the course of both their lives. "The lighting is perfect," a familiar voice said behind her, "though I might be biased toward the designer." Sophia turned to find Alex watching her with undisguised admiration. No longer did they need to maintain careful distance in professional settings. Their relationship had gradually become an open secret, then acknowledged fact within both Premier and Hayes Group circles. "You're early," she observed, smoothing the silk of her emerald gown, a gift from Alex for her recent birthday. "The gala doesn't start for another hour." "I wanted to see it through your eyes first," he said, moving to stand beside her. "Before the crowds arrive, just like last year." The parallel wasn't lost on Sophia. "Last year you were evaluating an acquisition target. What's your excuse now?" Do I need one to admire my girlfriend's exceptional work?" He took her hand, a gesture that had become comfortably familiar over the months. "Or perhaps I'm hoping for another dance that might lead to breakfast." Sophia laughed, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "You've had plenty of both since then." Indeed, Sunday dinners had become a tradition, often extending to Monday breakfast. Their relationship had developed with surprising ease once professional boundaries were clearly established. Sophia's community initiatives had flourished under the Hayes Foundation's support, while Alex had found in her both a challenging partner and a grounding influence amid his corporate responsibilities. "True," Alex acknowledged, "but the first ones were special, worth commemorating." The ballroom looked magical, reminiscent of their first encounter but evolved, much like their relationship. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across surfaces, while living trees created the impression of an enchanted forest. Display panels showcased the educational programs Sophia had helped expand across 5 countries, now reaching thousands of students who would never have accessed such opportunities otherwise. "Your mother would have loved this," Sophia said softly. It was something she could say now, understanding the depth of that influence on the man beside her. Alex's arm tightened around her waist. "She would have loved you." The simple statement held volumes. Over months of Sunday dinners and quiet conversations, Sophia had come to know the private person behind the Hayes name, the man who still painted abstract art on difficult days, who had his mother's compassionate spirit and his father's strategic mind, who carried both the privilege and burden of his inheritance with a sense of responsibility few understood. In turn, Alex had discovered the determined woman beneath Sophia's professional polish, the community college student who'd worked 3 jobs to launch her career, whose cultural heritage informed her creative vision, whose dreams extended far beyond corporate success. "I have something for you," Alex said, guiding her toward the terrace where they'd shared their first dance. "A first anniversary gift of sorts?" "Anniversary of what?" "Our collision by the ice sculpture," Sophia teased. "Of the moment my life changed direction." He produced a small blue envelope from his jacket. "Open it." Inside, Sophia found a deed and architectural renderings for a building in Queens, a converted warehouse space with soaring ceilings and abundant natural light. "What is this?" she asked, confusion evident. "The future home of Martinez Cultural Events," Alex replied, watching her face carefully. "Your own company, if you want it. The community-focused enterprise you described over pancakes a year ago." Sophia stared at him in shock. "Alex, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not a gift," he clarified. "It's an investment. The Hayes Foundation is establishing a grant program for cultural celebration in underserved communities. This would be the home base for those initiatives, with you as the independent director. Your vision, your leadership, your name on the door. But my position at Premier, the special initiatives, would continue if you choose. This would be separate, yours entirely. No Hayes control, no corporate oversight, just funding and resources to make accessible beauty a reality beyond luxury venues." Sophia's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "You remembered everything I talked about that morning." I remember every word, Alex said simply. It was the first time someone shared a vision that aligned so perfectly with what I've been trying to build at Hayes. Experiences that make people feel valued, regardless of their circumstances. Sophia touched the renderings with trembling fingers, possibilities expanding before her. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, Alex suggested. The foundation board has already approved the funding. The space is secured. All that's missing is the visionary to bring it to life. The gesture embodied what had grown between them. Mutual respect, understanding of each other's deepest values, support that empowered rather than overshadowed. I'll more than consider it, Sophia said, emotions making her voice unsteady. This is everything I've dreamed of creating. Music drifted from inside as the orchestra began warming up. Alex extended his hand with a smile that still made her heart race. May I have this dance, Ms. Martinez, for old time's sake? Sophia stepped into his arms, moving with the practiced ease of partners who had learned each other's rhythms. This feels familiar, she murmured. With one significant difference, Alex replied. This time you know exactly who you're dancing with. As they moved across the terrace under the emerging stars, Sophia reflected on the improbable journey from that first encounter. The event planner and the corporate heir, brought together by chance and kept together by something deeper. Shared values, mutual respect, and a connection that had withstood professional complications and personal revelations. I'm glad I didn't know who you were that first night, Sophia admitted. If I had, I might never have agreed to dance with you. And I might never have discovered that the most valuable acquisition wasn't premier planning after all, Alex replied, his voice low against her ear. It was the chance to know you, Sophia Martinez. Later that evening, as the gala flourished around them, they stole a moment alone on the same terrace where they'd first danced. Alex held her close, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. When the event is over, he whispered, would you consider continuing this celebration at my place? I know it's not our usual routine, but tonight seems special. Sophia looked up at him, at this complex man who had transformed from mysterious dance partner to corporate adversary to trusted partner. I'd like that. Hours later, as moonlight filtered through the windows of his penthouse, Sophia lay in Alex's arms, their bodies still warm from lovemaking. His scent surrounded her, now familiar, comforting, essential. Tomorrow morning, she would wake to that same scent on the pillows, no longer a stranger's lingering presence, but a beloved companion's promise of return. What are you thinking? Alex asked, fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Sophia smiled, thinking of ice sculptures and charity galas, of pancake breakfasts and difficult truths, of professional boundaries crossed and personal ones carefully built, of a journey that had begun with one dance and led to possibilities neither could have imagined. That sometimes, she murmured, the most beautiful events are the ones you never planned for. Alex tightened his arms around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. And sometimes, he replied, the most valuable acquisitions are the ones that acquire you right back. And as they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's embrace, the city lights painted patterns across the ceiling, much like the night a year ago, when Alexander Hayes had found himself unable to sleep, thinking of a woman in a midnight blue dress. But unlike that night, he now held the answer to the question that had kept him awake, the question of whether someone could truly see him beyond his name and position. In Sophia's eyes, in her arms, in her unwavering expectation that he be his best self, Alex had found something no corporate acquisition could provide. A partner who challenged, supported, and loved him for who he was beneath the Hayes legacy. And in his steadfast belief in her vision, his respect for her independence, and his willingness to create space for her dreams alongside his responsibilities, Sophia had found a partner who saw her completely, past, present, and the future they were now building together. When morning came, she would wake to his scent on the pillows, not a fleeting memory of a night's dance, but the enduring promise of many more dances to come.